The thing I absolutely love about my school, it has such a positive culture and climate, and it shows through in the way that the students interact with all of us, and the way just like my students come with a lot of trauma. And the thing that I'm very proud of is that they don't just have like one adult that they trust. They have multiple adults that they trust. When you ask them, hey, do you want to talk to someone about that? It's like, yeah, my teacher, you, the vice principal, the campus supervisor, the this, that. Like they list all of these adults because everybody is extremely student-centered. And what I mean by saying that is everybody has a very positive culture and mindset moving forward. So I think that's step one, is like you've got to create that positive culture and climate. I think culture is number one, no matter what. And then I would say the next thing is the leadership has to give the freedom for this to happen. I think a lot of my teachers too came with their own type of adult traumas, right?
That's Tony Richardson, Vice Principal of the MLK Steam and Design Campus in California. He's joining us today to discuss how he's helping his elementary school community become life-ready innovators, reimagining the world. How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools. Creativity is what happens when a mind encounters an obstacle. It's the human process of finding a way through, over, around, or beneath. No obstacles, no creativity. That's a line from the book Math with Bad Drawings, Illuminating the Ideas That Shape Our Reality by Ben Orlin. Ever since I met Tony 5 years ago, he struck me as a resilient leader, exploring what's possible for learners today and how to bring the experiences he was learning about back to his campus. He was particularly inspired by Design 39 campus in San Diego. Like Design 39, MLK is also part of a public school district. When listening to Tony today, I want you to join me in reflecting on the strategies he's using to design change, but also how he did so within each of the different roles he's had throughout his career in education. We often believe we have to wait for a certain position or title to influence our environment. Tony's story reminds us we don't have to wait. Navigating the space between your obstacle and the solution is where your creativity comes in. The space is vague, overwhelming, and often uncomfortable. This is where design thinking practices become invaluable. By using specific frameworks to design the space between the obstacle and the solution, you have the opportunity to unlock your creativity and find a way through, over, around, or beneath. I've added a link in the show notes to a design sprint that you can try if there's a current obstacle that you're facing and you want to design a solution using design thinking practices. This is one of the reasons why we advocate for design thinking mindsets and skills to be taught early on, so that we can create learners who from a young age see obstacles as opportunities and know how to navigate the space in between using their creativity. And so I begin by asking Tony how he designed a vision to do this for the elementary school at MLK Steam and Design Campus.
First kind of designed the school just centering around the idea of our mission and vision statement. We took a lot of the work from visiting Design 39, the campus in San Diego, but really kind of centering around the idea and the ideas that we saw there about making students life ready. So more so than just college and career ready, and recognizing too, like we're in a very tough area and it's not a sustainable thing to think that every person is going to have an opportunity to go to college. However, every person is going to have the opportunity to be successful in their own life. And so the idea behind MLK was to create a campus that's going to get students to be life ready. And so our whole thing, when we talk about like the what are we trying to do, we're trying to get students to be life ready, to have life ready skills, right? To be prepared. And then how are we going to do that? To be innovators. And so the idea of being an innovator is being someone who is an active part of changing or improving something. And then what were we going to do with that? We're going to reimagine the world. And that was kind of the whole idea. The idea was to shoot big, right? This huge vision of our students are the ones that can go out there with the skills that they get from our campus and through the district and be the ones that actively change the world, which then births our mission vision statement, life ready innovators, reimagining the world. And so it's something that we live by, it's something that we talk about. It's something that when we talk about the vision for the education that happens at our school, it's all about creating students that are life ready, not just college and career ready.
Absolutely. And can you share with us a little bit about how that statement came into being? Like, what was the process like? Like, who was involved and what did those conversations look like?
Yeah, so it was neat. It was a lot of the instructional support staff was picked about a half a year before the school was even open. So the buildings weren't even finished being built yet. And we all sat down and that's exactly what we did. We said, what's the what, the how, and the why of what we're going to do when we design this school. And the district had asked, like, we want to do school differently. And so this school needs to do school differently. And so we talked about what that looks like. And for each component that we went through, we sat down with the instructional support staff team, the principal, myself, and we just started listing adjectives of the things that we wanted to see out of our students. The other thing coupled with that was we wanted a mission vision statement that was clear, but also succinct. It was something that people remembered and knew. It wasn't these long statements that we talked about. Like every time you see a mission vision statement, you add the word "and" to it. I feel like you're just adding more complications. And I don't mean to like knock people that have "and" in it. That's great. Like it's your vision, but we wanted something that was real succinct that teachers, students, parents, like everyone could look at this, recognize it, say it, remember it, and know that it's something we feel. And so when we went through it, we picked out the adjectives to us that were the most meaningful in the what, the how, and the why. And that's why we ended up with what we did. And more so even like, we centered around being a creator, an inventor, things like that. And what I thought was really cool is when we centered around innovator, we talked about the world as we know it. There's so many things that have been invented, stuff like that. But what truly do we need? We need to make things better, faster, right? We need to improve. And so we love the idea of being an innovator. And then that, ironically enough, has turned into our mascot here as well, the MLK Innovators. So yeah. And so we always talk about the idea of improving and the resiliency behind improving. I think there's a lot of beautiful qualities to that.
Not everyone will go to college, said Tony, but everyone has an opportunity to be successful. I love how he highlights how the district wanted to do school differently. The answer to that again puts us in a vague space in between. What does doing school differently mean? How do we go from that question to an actual solution we can implement? Current teaching and learning practices and policies are huge obstacles to doing school differently. So if we want to overcome them to explore opportunities, we need specific frameworks to facilitate that dialogue so that we're intentionally designing for change that gives us structure to this blank space. Tony also highlights the importance of having one sentence as your vision statement. This allows for the vision to not only be more memorable, but also become language that's used by everybody. For example, Apple has Think Different, Nike has Just Do It, and MLK has life-ready innovators reimagining the world. I particularly like how Tony is framing innovation. The best innovations today work in the service of people that help us do things better and do better things that amplify our own potential. Tony shares how this requires a growth mindset. It's one of so many reasons why teaching design thinking at an early age is critical. This year, we saw the World Economic Forum add resilience and stress tolerance to the list of top skills that will be trending in 2025. I asked Tony to share how he creates a growth mindset culture at the intersection of resilience and innovation.
I have two STEAM specialists. We have a primary STEAM specialist and an intermediate STEAM specialist. And we talk about that pretty frequently because we notice, especially students first coming in, if things didn't work right away, boom, like we give up, right? Kind of a thing. And that was a huge skill that we had to talk through and the idea of innovation. And one thing that I love about my campus, when I walk classrooms, my teachers do a wonderful job of building that in their students. I just happened to be in a second grade classroom yesterday and I saw they were doing towers based on Iggy Peck Architects. They just read that book and just watching students going through the struggle and they were doing certain things. And man, this is so hard. I give up. And just watching the way my teachers, nope, we don't give up. We go back to the plan. Let's revise the plan. Let's revise the plan and really building those skills. And I think what we're excited about on campus and like my team specialist and I talk about just seeing the change that's already happened in those students, but watching them grow from, now this is really our first year being open, watching them grow from primary students and learning those skills of being resilient, sticking with a problem, trying to innovate, whatever design or problem you're trying to solve, seeing that grow to where they're now finally intermediate students. I think that's going to be a really, really neat change to watch. But everybody here maintains a really positive mindset as far as like teaching students growth mindset and teaching them to kind of stick with something, build that resiliency, it's okay to be frustrated sometimes, but how to deal with that frustration.
It's not surprising to hear Tony share these ideas. I shared earlier how his resiliency as a leader who believed in a vision allowed him to persevere through a series of obstacles. He never waited for a particular role to live his vision and values. He did so any opportunity he had, and over time was able to impact more and more people and build that credibility and trust within his district. I asked Tony to share his journey with us and 2 inflection points that shaped him into the leader he is today.
So starting with the district, when I actually became like a formal credentialed teacher, I started teaching middle school at Emerson Middle School in our district, which is known as a tougher school, but it's something like I absolutely loved. I love my kids. I love what I got to do. And then the people there and the leadership that existed at that school gave me a lot of the opportunity to be successful. So I was a new teacher and I taught science, but then I was afforded the opportunity to teach science. I would talk to leadership a lot and like, hey, I want to kind of expand. So then I was given the opportunity to teach Project Lead the Way, teach engineering classes. I was given the opportunity to hold clubs. And then as the program slowly grew and we saw kids, getting really excited about it, I was very fortunate. Everybody there was very supportive about like, let's get them more materials. Let's get them this, let's get them that. And so it was nice to have the support to kind of see the vision through and see that too, like kids that came from really tough backgrounds were able to succeed in that environment because they weren't given the option otherwise, right? It wasn't a matter of like, oh, they have tough circumstances. No. We will rise to those circumstances. If you set those expectations, they will easily rise to those. But if you go back even further, I actually started working with kids and teaching drumline in music programs, which is ironic because I love music. And so that's how I really got to develop a love for working with kids. I started teaching and coaching a drumline program when I was 13, actually. And so I was almost the same age as the kids, but I just knew I wanted to do that. And then I worked at various high schools, things like that. And I went through this weird period of time where I thought I wouldn't be a teacher. I was like, oh, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go into business. And I found myself taking all these business classes and I hated it. And I absolutely struggled. Like I struggled to stay awake. I struggled to like enjoy myself. I failed a lot of classes. And then someone finally said to me, like, why are you struggling that hard? You like working with kids. And so finally that's what made me go like, I'll give it a shot. And the minute I did, like everything just clicked. I don't know. It was where I was happy and I enjoyed being around kids. And I always kind of had a vision for, I just wanted to do things differently than the way I had gone through school. I just wanted to kind of see things through differently. So a lot of different things led me there and I can get into all those different things. But right now I am very, very proud and honored to say I'm the vice principal of our newest STEAM school in BCSD. And I want emphasis on the STEAM, not science. So emphasis on STEAM and Design campus in Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary. And I'm very, very honored and proud to have been selected to be a part of that and be someone who was on the design committee for the school. I got to pick everything from the furniture to the people and just very proud. It's something that I put a lot of my life and energy into. And it's something I'm very, very, I have not ever loved doing something more than what I currently do right now, honestly.
No, it shows in your every post. It shows in just listening to you right now. And so I'm so excited to actually start getting into some of the details about MLK. But tell us, first of all, like you've talked a lot about design. Tell me a little bit about how you first kind of came to learn about design thinking and how that has informed some of the work that you've been doing at MLK.
Yeah. And I know I'm going to kind of jump around, but you talked about a major inflection point. One of my major inflection points was when I was selected to be an instructional specialist in curriculum and instruction for science. And at the time, the assistant superintendent, who's now our superintendent, was very, very good to me too. And he kind of just said, hey, if this is something you want to do, here's what I need. And I said, what is it? And he's like, we need science to happen. And I was like, all right. So that was my task. It was just very vague. It was like, we just need, I just need science to happen. And I was like, okay. And at first I was nervous. And then I kind of took that as like, okay, like there's a level of trust there and a level of responsibility that's being given. And I think what I came to realize very quickly, that was a huge inflection point in my career, is like, cool, they're trusting me to do this task, but it's definitely not something I can do alone. And so I think that was something where I really, truly learned the power of a team. And I had a wonderful team and I had a wonderful teacher leadership team. I still miss working with them to this day, but they were really kind of the people that helped spurred me on and kind of shared the same vision for what that's going to look like. So my point of saying that is during that time is when I came across design thinking. And so just kind of in researching different ways to do things, I'm a huge advocate too of the 5E model of instruction. I think it's a great inquiry-based instructional platform that's easy to kind of follow. And I think it's an easy entry point for people that are new to inquiry-based instruction. But I also came across design thinking at that time. And I think what caught me so much about it, so much more than any other design process, and it's something I really love too and we're not like amazing at it yet here, right? It's still a new kind of a process. And I think that's worth being said. It's not like everything's perfect, but I love the empathy piece of it. I think that's the thing that stuck out to me the most about it. And that everything you're trying to do is very like user centered. It's always focusing on whoever it is that you're designing for, whatever it is that you're designing for. And I think even with kids more so, it really it really forces them to think about a focus, right? And that kind of user and empathize and try to put yourself in another position. And so I think that's what really stood out to me. And that's the most powerful piece of it.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to hear you say how like either leaders created a space for you to explore your passions earlier on when it was Project Lead the Way, or like, these are the other things you want to do, or having a superintendent trust you and say like, hey, this is something that we need. And I definitely see you carry that forward just in that one meeting, even that I was kind of sitting in, where like the teachers are really leading that conversation while you were there. And so I see how you've carried forward that culture of trust. And I would love for you to share maybe just a little bit more around some of the strategies that you've used and that other people can learn from you in building that trust, because it is in turn what leads to that creativity, to your point around like the science, the design thinking. And now here you are opening, this new school. So tell us a little bit about how you've carried that forward and strategies you've used that other people can learn from.
Yeah, I think when I reflect on like myself and the positions I've been put into, I was just talking to someone about this the other day, but like everything that I was asked to do was like a first of something. So like, hey, we don't have science, like go do science. We want to start STEAM academies, go do STEAM academies. We're opening a new school, go open a new school. And so everything was kind of a vague, uncharted space. But what I realized is like, I think what gave me a lot of confidence to do well in those positions was that somebody looked at me like, it's going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it's going to be tough, but I believe in you and I believe that you can do this. And so kind of pushing people to do that. And I think the two things that I've really carried forward with me, even at my own school site, I have very high expectations. And someone told me that the other day, like working with you sometimes is like, you push really hard, but I don't push hard unless I know that someone can meet those expectations. And so when people say simple things like, it's from a book I'm reading by Liz Wideman called Multipliers. And she talks about like how she would say like, how hard could it be? And then people would get frustrated with that. And it's like, yeah, I like that attitude. Like, how hard can it be? But like, it is going to be hard. What we're going to do is going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be extremely rewarding. So I think holding people to high expectations, but making it clear to them that I'm doing this because I absolutely 100% believe you can do this. And I think the other big thing with building a culture of trust, and we've done it here, is like, every time I see someone doing something, or I walk in a classroom, or somebody tells me about a conversation that they had, I am first and foremost putting absolute trust in that person, that whatever it is that was done is being done in the best intentions of whatever it is that's happening there. And that's something my principal has really helped instill in me and has done as well. As when I walk a classroom, when I first walk in, no matter what I see right away, I'm assuming that whatever I'm seeing the teacher do is in the best interest or intentions of their students, because they're the ones that know their students better than anybody. And so I think when you start there and you have the conversations with people, rather than look for like those gotcha moments, or like, why were you doing this? Or like, that's not a standard. Or like, it's funny when I used to first walk classes and they would do like certain fun Friday activities or whatever. I think there was a nervousness about like, well, we're only doing this for 10 minutes. Like, I don't care. Like, whatever you're doing, I'm assuming that's the best possible thing for your students in that moment. And I'm trusting you, and I'm trusting that whatever I'm seeing, like, there's a reason behind it. And so what's nice is I think as the time's gone on, that slowly trickled to everyone on campus. And so they know they're going to be, there's a level of accountability, right? And there's a level of, obviously what we're trying to do is extremely important. There's also a huge level of trust, and what we're seeing go on. They're being trusted to be educational practitioners in that process.
Believing and trusting that people can rise to the occasion is a unanimous theme across organizations that accelerate innovation by turning obstacles into opportunities. Tony mentions how being trusted made him feel valued. When interviewing the teachers at Design 39 during my research study, being trusted and being treated as professionals were mentioned by every single person as a reason for their collective success. In the book, Turning Research into Results, authors Richard Clark from the University of Southern California and Fred Estes from the Nueva School share that we must design change at the intersection of knowledge, motivation, and organizational influences. Through that, we can identify the gap between current and desired performances. From a knowledge perspective, individuals may know how to do something or understand why a given task is important. From a motivation perspective, they may lack the self-efficacy or belief in their ability to meet that metric. Finally, from an organizational perspective, not achieving a goal may result from the organization not aligning policies, procedures, or training to meet that desired goal. This reminds me of, say, the example of professional learning, where the focus is so often only on knowledge, and we neglect to consider the motivation and organizational influences that are going to allow us to move our performance to where we want to see it. Consideration when thinking about professional learning is rarely given to the possibility that individuals might have the knowledge of what's required, but perhaps do not have the motivation, or that the organization has not aligned policies and training schedules to allow people to move between the current performance and desired performance. When you hear Tony speak about how he's designing the culture at MLK, he's designing at the intersection of knowledge, motivation, and organizational influences. So I asked Tony to share more about the motivation influences and how he balances that with the culture of toxic positivity that we so often hear about.
So I've been in situations where I've seen that, the toxic positivity, and I think we could all be guilty of that at certain points in time and things like that. But I think there's a difference between toxic positivity. And then I think when I try to be positive with people, and I am very positive with people, but it's not just lost optimism, right? It's like, if I'm going to give you positive feedback, or I'm going to say like the things that I think are going well and succeeding, it's got to be very specific. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. Here at MLK, we are very positive. We do have a very heavy growth mindset. I think we have a wonderful climate and culture, but it's not just hey, you're doing such a great job. We have difficult conversations. We talk a lot about the things that aren't going well. There's a lot of growth that still needs to be made. But I do heavily believe in when you give positive praise or you give positive feedback, it's got to be very specific. And it can't just be I'm trying to just pull something out of nowhere to make you feel better about yourself. And I tell people all the time, I'm not giving you this feedback or compliment to flatter you. I'm giving it to you because it's true. This is something that's really happening. And then in the same breath, if something's not happening or it's not going well, you need that feedback as well. And it's weird. I almost view that as positive feedback as well. If I'm just telling you everything's great, but you don't feel like you're growing at all as an educator, that's harming you as well. Same boat. If you're not telling me hey, as a vice principal, you're not helping me, you're not supporting me, or this isn't helping me grow at all, I need to know that too. Otherwise, that's not helpful for me. So just to look at me and go everything's great, Tony, and then turn around and be that guy is lost. that's not helpful either, right? So that's what I think about when I think toxic positivity. It doesn't help anybody grow.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing. I knew you'd have something great to say. So you've painted this beautiful vision for us, and you kind of have shared a little bit about how at MLK you guys live by these principles. Take us into a classroom, and if you could share with us maybe one or two projects or lessons that are happening, but contextualize it, maybe a before it might have been this way, and now we've reframed it, and this is what it looks like to live by that vision that you painted for us.
The one thing I do want to preface is I am going to make it sound really yeah, it's awesome, but it's still a lot of growth, right? We still have a long way to go. And I'm proud of that. That's fine. But I also want people to know that it's not man, it sounds perfect over. It's not perfect. It's hard work. And there's a lot of things that still need to happen and a lot of growth that still needs to be made. And the pandemic didn't help with any of that. But that being said, I think what's really cool about our school that I love, absolutely love, I would have said that originally, if you had walked the classroom, right, you're going to see instruction split up into little chunks of time, right? And it would be hey, Saba, let's go walk math time. Let's go walk ELA time. And it's that doesn't exist here. The things that happen here, if you look at our schedule, everything says integrated learning. And then it'll say lunch, integrated learning, recess, integrated learning. And so what I love about that, and the idea that really, almost my entire campus is kind of really encompassed, and I say almost the entire campus because it's still tough for a lot of people to kind of develop that, is everything is very integrated. And so one of the best compliments I just got the other day from one of my third grade teachers is she said, my student asked me the other day, hey, we've done like science all day. What are we doing? And she laughed because she's like, we haven't done science all day. Like, yes, we focused around this particular scientific topic, but like we've done read alouds, we've done shared reads, we did a math task centered around it. Like we dove into the content behind the science. And so the thing that I love, if you walk a classroom at MLK, everything is very integrated. Everything flows very well together. You're not going to walk in and see these like little chunks of time, because the big thing that we talk about here is like, you're planning for these large instructional goals as a team. And so why would you plan these huge, large instructional goals and targets and then break up your time into like these tiny little chunks of time and force yourself to like, I'm not really done with this thing in ELA, but we got to move on. And then the other big shift that we've talked about is that idea of being told to move on. And so a lot of teachers, not my teacher, but a lot of teachers will say, we've got to move on. We got to move on. Like, we're being told. I'm like, who is telling you this? I don't understand that. And the only equate I have to that is, hey, we're builders building a house and like the concrete's not ready yet, but we got to move on. Let's just build the house. And it's like, you would never do that. So why do you do that with kids? We're not ready to move on with the skills we've developed, but we're like, we've got to go. I don't understand that. So when you walk a classroom at MLK, you see projects that are very integrated with one another. Everything obviously has a pretty heavy STEAM focus behind it. But then the thing that I really love is a lot of my teams are doing a very good job of incorporating 5E and inquiry-based learning into everything that they do, even things that are uncomfortable. So like, I shout out to my 4th grade team right now. I know they were having a really hard time. It was their first time kind of integrating history with 5E and inquiry-based lessons, but they did it. They got in there, they did it, they did the work. It was tough, but I think what everybody sees here is the value that it has to our students and the engagement that it has with our students, and just our students like coming to school. They like doing something that's different, right? I've had students say that to me too, like, because they all came from other schools. One said to me the other day, you guys just do like math so differently here. And they were like, I just like, you just, hey, do this, do that, do this. And then you do it. And she's like, you guys make us like do things with the math. And like, there's always a task. There's always like a scenario. And like she said, it's challenging, but like, it's also more fun. I'm like, yeah, that's what we're going for. So it's kind of cool.
Hearing Tony talk about integrated learning reminds me of the analogy from David Perkins, author of Making Learning Whole. He shares how in the game of baseball, we don't spend a month learning how to catch, and then another month learning how to bat, and then another month learning how to throw. Instead of isolating each area, all the knowledge, skills, and mindsets needed to be successful as a baseball player are integrated and connected to a game as a whole. So I asked Tony to share how he transitioned from content taught in isolation to integrated learning that is whole.
So I would say the two biggest things, it's the culture that you set. And then as a leader or the administration, it's the trust and the freedom that you set. So I think first off, the thing I absolutely love about my school, it has such a positive culture and climate. And it shows through in the way that the students interact with all of us, and the way just like my students come with a lot of trauma. And the thing that I'm very proud of is that they don't just have like one adult that they trust. They have multiple adults that they trust. Like when you ask them like, hey, do you want to talk to someone about that? It's like, yeah, my teacher, you, the vice principal, the campus supervisor, the this, that, like they list all of these adults because everybody is extremely student centered. And what I mean by saying that is everybody has a very positive culture and mindset moving forward. So I think that's step one, is like, you've got to create that positive culture and climate. I think culture is number one, no matter what. And then I would say the next thing is the leadership has to give the freedom for this to happen. I think a lot of my teachers too came with their own type of adult traumas, right? Some of them came from campuses they absolutely loved, and they loved the leadership there and they loved how things were done. And then a lot, just being honest, they came with traumas, and there were various things. And it's nothing against those leaders. It's just sometimes not a good fit or a good mesh. Then I think the big thing that happened here, and I would encourage like a school that's trying to change, is you've got to give the space and the freedom and let them know like, it's going to be okay. We're going to fail. We're going to fail together. There's going to be things that work. There's going to be things that don't work. We've experienced that a million times. I'm probably going to go out of my office today and experience that 100 more times. But it's knowing that you have the safe space to do that. And someone's not going to come down and rain down on you for having done that. And then you just have to trust the process, that it's going to be messy sometimes. It's not always going to be perfect. Not everybody's always going to agree with it as well. But there does have to be kind of an agreement that like, we are going to try this moving forward, and we are going to have the freedom and the safety to fail together.
The positive team climate that Tony shares as the most important element when designing change aligns with research from Amy Edmondson, who's the professor of leadership and management at the Harvard Business School and author of Fearless Organizations. She says this positive climate is reflective of a culture that embodies psychological safety. In this culture, people feel comfortable asking for help, sharing suggestions informally, and challenging the status quo without fear of negative social consequences. As a result, organizations are more likely to innovate quickly, unlock the benefits of diversity, and adapt well to change. Tony mentions the word teacher trauma, and I ask him to share more about this term and how he's supported his teachers in making this transition to a culture of psychological safety.
I will start by saying professional development hasn't happened to the level I wanted to yet, definitely because of the pandemic. And a lot of it too was recognizing don't want to add more to their plate as much as like a lot of our PD, if you will, or a lot of our meetings really just centered around creating a culture of trust and safety. And that's really what we did, especially year one. We're all on Zoom. Some of us are at home, some of us aren't. Like we're all over the place. And so it was extremely difficult to like, how do you bring everyone together without ever having been together? And so I think a lot of our PD centered around culture and trust. We had a lot of teachers that came with everything from maybe they just did not get along well with their site admin for whatever reason. And I'm not knocking either party. It's just sometimes not a great fit, right? For a variety of reasons. Some people want really strong leaders that are going to tell them what to do every minute of every day. Some people want that kind of creative freedom or no structure at all, right? It's just different, varying kind of things. I think a lot of people had trauma with like classroom walkthroughs and things. I think a lot of people were very nervous that if they weren't doing what their previous site administrator like perceived that they needed to be doing at that time or pushing the initiative that they were pushing, like there would be punitive measures kind of taken, or they would be called to an office and talked to, or an email would be sent. And that was a lot of the like specific things that I would see. And again, I'm not trying to knock any, like I'm not there. I'm not at the, I have no idea what's happening. So it is what it is. I'm just going off of what I was told. And so that was a lot of the trauma that I saw. And I think there was a lot of trauma with the way they were trusted. I think a lot of people were moved around a lot, so they never felt like they could like get really solid with a particular grade level. Those were a lot of the kind of teacher traumas. And I saw a lot of people too that wanted to come here because they wanted to kind of like reignite the spark, that you will, for why they fell in love with education and fell in love with working with kids. And they wanted a new opportunity. And it wasn't the allure of like, oh, it's a new building or new this or new that, because it's in a super tough area. It's in a tough part of town. But I think everybody saw like the idea of like, I think this is what I need. Like I need that kind of new spark and that new energy, and I'm ready to get back in there. And that's one thing I'm proud of too. Like I have brand new teachers, I have very veteran teachers, but when you talk to them, like it's the same level of excitement about what they're doing. And I think that's something I'm really proud of too. We treat our teachers like educational practitioners, a lot like doctors, right? It's not, oh, you have students in front of you, just teach a standard, just go through this kind of day-to-day minutiae process. It was, no, you need to treat students the same way a doctor would treat patients. I don't look and say I have 10 patients today, so like we'll go cast, Band-Aid, Band-Aid. Like you don't do that. Don't do that with kids. That was a big part of the original conversation of setting the culture. But I think what it was reiterating how we're trusting, and reiterating too that like my principal and I, we were both new in the roles that we were in when we opened the school. We both looked at each other, were like, the school's not finished being built. Yeah, there's a pandemic raging. We're not going to get to do PD the way that we want to. We're not going to get to open the school the way we want to. However, all of these things are still going to happen. And so it was like, we had to build that trust in one another first, and then kind of communicating that out to teachers. And it definitely took time, and it's, there's still a long way to go. But I think a lot of the things that were framed around was setting the tone of how we were going to treat teachers, setting the tone of how they were going to be heard. And then I think what really helped, honestly, is through even the individual conversations and the individual level of support. We're very big on, we don't hold all the answers, but we are going to get in there and we are going to do our best to help support you in any way possible. Any member of our team, the instructional support staff included, is going to do that, not just the principal and I. And I think as we had more and more of those individual conversations and individual experiences, I think really that's when it started to click to people like, hey, they're not just saying things, like they really believe in this, and they really are willing to get in there, and they are willing to help support me, and they are willing to do whatever they need to do. And that's always the thing I try to reiterate to my teachers, no matter what problem they face, no matter what happens, is like, hey, our first and foremost, we are 100% here to help support you in whatever it is that's going on. And I'm always, no matter what, like I'm going to be on your side. We will get through this together. And I think the more we have those individual experiences, it really just bled into who we are as a school.
So that reiteration of those experiences. So maybe it's not like a different strategy every single time, but it's the same one over and over and over until you start to believe what it is. That's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah. I think that was a big thing too, is like, a lot of times we look for like the new shiny fun thing, right? And it's like, let's do this now. Let's do this. This is exciting. And I think the thing that's helped us is you stick with it, right? And you reiterate the same message and you communicate. I'm a big communicator, like over communicator. So I love to, I think that's when people get frustrated, right? Is when they feel like they're not being communicated with or they're out of the loop. That's most of the times, I would say even problems with students, arguably, when you trace back, like, wow, how did this start? It generally is a breakdown somewhere and someone not talking to someone or not telling someone enough. And so that's a huge proponent of who I am too. And so I think when you've communicated the same thing and you've lived the actions that you're communicating to, I think that's what really helps.
Absolutely. So you've talked a couple of times about the area that you're in. Tell us a little bit about the area and the students you're working with.
They come with so many different traumas. Like, we hear things every day that would absolutely shock you. Families go through a lot of trauma. There's just a lot going on in this area. But the thing that I absolutely love about it is not only do we look at those students and recognize, you don't ignore it. You recognize the trauma that they go through and you recognize the situations they are. However, we still hold them to really high expectations. And the things that I talk to my students about a lot is the fact that you are going through this and that is absolutely awful. And I cannot imagine. However, do not let that define who you are going to be as a person moving forward. And I think that's a big thing everybody shares, my teachers included, is we all recognize the struggles that they come from. However, we are not about to let that hold them back from being just as successful as a school in, a higher socioeconomic part of town or with more support. And the other thing that I love too is I don't care. Our community, there's a variety of different ways these kids are loved and raised. And I think the thing that I really appreciate and love is every time I've talked to a member of our parent community or community in the area, everybody is so supportive of what happens at the school and so supportive of their students, right, going to the school. And so I just absolutely, I love that. And I'm very proud of that they're being held to the same kind of expectations. It's not about lowering expectations because they have tough lives. It's about, let's show you how to make that tough life into a wonderful life. And let's show you how to be that life ready person moving forward. That's something I like. I wouldn't trade that for the world about being here. I love that about being in MLK.
That just might be one of the most powerful segments we've had on the podcast and a testament to how we can help young people turn obstacles into opportunities. In one study led by the Stanford Graduate School of Education, they found that through instruction, students transfer design thinking strategies beyond the classroom and that the biggest benefits were to low-achieving students. The study included 200 students from grade 6. The researchers worked with the educators during class time to coach half the group of students on 2 specific design thinking strategies. They then assigned them a project where they could apply these skills. The 2 strategies included seeking out constructive feedback and identifying multiple possible outcomes to a challenge. Each of these strategies was designed to prevent what the researchers called early closure, identifying a solution before examining the problem. After class, the students were presented with different challenges to see how they would approach them. The students who were taught about constructive criticism asked for feedback when presented with a new challenge and were more likely to go back and revise their work. This area was significant as a pretest revealed that low-achieving students were behind their high-achieving peers when seeking out feedback, a gap that the researchers say disappeared after classroom instruction on design thinking strategies. In another study, Razzouk and Shute, in a study from 2012, share that core elements must be in place for this to be successful: sufficient practice, scaffolded support, and formative feedback. As students' design thinking skills continue to be nurtured, they can apply these strategies to be problem finders and problem solvers, helping them be more comfortable with change, giving them that resilience and stress tolerance strategies, and empowering them to solve unstructured problems while working with new information, gaining knowledge, and developing those skills and mindsets that cannot be found in the confines of a textbook. We turn the conversation now to discuss assessment. Tony is an advocate of portfolios, and so I asked him to share how he's thinking about assessment at MLK.
two things I will start the preface by saying definitely two areas where need the most work. Like that's still very new. I'm just going to be honest. And still, that's definitely a challenge. And so it's one piece at a time. So I will say that. One thing with the digital portfolios and the idea that we're doing behind portfolios is I want students to be in charge of really keeping track of their learning and how they progress through their learning at the school site. So it's something we've kind of pushed out. It's very new. And I just want to see how teachers and students interact with it. It's something we taught students and teachers how to set up in the STEAM lab, but it's something that I really want them to keep track of their educational progress and their educational career while they're at MLK. The other big component of it that we're slowly incorporating is I really want them to be able to keep track of their own kind of like data, if you will, and understand where their reading levels are, where they're at in math, where they're at in this, so they can see their own progression and see how they're moving. And I think my teachers do a really good job of having like data conversations, individual conversations with kiddos about where they're kind of at in the process. And then recognizing another thing, one thing my superintendent says that I absolutely love too, that we try to let students know is like data is where we are. It's not who we are. And that's, I think, one of my favorite quotes that he says a lot. And it's something that I really want my students to understand too, because I do see students get frustrated, like where they're at in their learning, but that's just where we are right now. That's not who we are. It's not who we are as a person. We're still making progress, right? And that's constantly in the pursuit of progress. So that's my thing with digital portfolios. I also just purely for the, like, I hate to say it, but like for the fun aspect of it, I just love them to see all the things they've done, like all the cool stuff that they've got to engage in. And I think teachers have fun with it as well. I have a second grade teacher who was really like nervous about it, but now is really like, I love it. Like we do things like, hey, let's add this to our portfolio. Hey, let's do this. And I just think of my kiddos that are in second grade, like by the time they get to sixth grade and they kind of reflect on like, wow, like I've done a lot. And that's really what I want them to be able to do and look back on kind of their progress and progression throughout their history at MLK. And then as far as the assessment piece goes, still definitely something we're really, really working towards. But the big kind of focus when I talk to teams about assessment, I think all too often we look at assessment as this evaluative tool or like, oh, this determines the grade or this determines blah, right? Whereas we've really reframed the conversation around like, no, that's the tool for you as the teacher, right? To kind of go back and assess where are my students at in their learning and what do I need to reteach and rehit and when do I need to reassess? And so it's more kind of reframing it from like this evaluative, scary experience into like, this is a tool that lets me know where we're at in our learning currently. Literally, like we were saying earlier, like where we are right now, right? And what I kind of need to do, what I need to redo. And also kind of reframing the idea of what assessments can look like and the way students can present information, right? Versus just having to be like this pencil, paper, multiple choice, scary experience all the time, right?
I've been able to follow Tony's work because he's a leader who's using social media to tell the story of his work and his community. I asked Tony to share the relationship between leadership and social influence and the value he's gained from sharing his story.
I also shared a lot when I was in CNI. I shared a lot when I was in the ELP. It's the thing I think I love about social media. To me, I love celebrating the accomplishments of my team. And I love just sharing kind of the exciting work we're doing with students. And I think the value specifically at MLK and sharing the experiences that we have there is I hope those can be replicated at other sites. And I hope too that they can connect with teachers at my school and say like, hey, I saw you did this. Like, how did you do that? And it's just kind of celebrating, like I said, the accomplishments of my teachers, my team, the amazing things they do with kids every day. And I really like to use it as kind of a platform for that. And then secondary to that, I love the connections that are made on social media. Clearly, like you and I, right? I've talked a lot through social media. I love getting ideas from other educators on social media. I think my teachers love getting other ideas on social media. And so I think the power of using it as a professional tool and the effort of professional growth helps kind of grow the group, if you will, that you can collaborate with, right? From a small scale district level, even to a global level.
Tony is truly a transformational leader. He's building trust, he's encouraging creativity, he's recognizing accomplishments, and he's inspiring a collective vision to create life-ready innovators reimagining the world. Creating this environment during a pandemic was no easy task. I asked Tony to share strategies for creating this culture of trust and safety where people feel safe taking risks and challenging traditional models.
The biggest advice I would say is like, you have to be open. You have to be vulnerable. I've talked about it a lot. You have to be willing to fail together as a team, right? But then the other part of that is I would say you also have to be willing to do the work and see what's going to work, what's not going to work, how hard to push, how little to push with certain things. But just know that you've got to get the right people on board that are willing to get in there and like be messy. And I think that's one thing everyone kind of agreed to when they came to MLK was like, hey, the idea of everything here was to do it differently. And so recognizing, and it still happens sometimes like, hey, we're doing this. I don't know that I love that. It's like, yep, but we're going to try it. Like, we're going to do it differently. And that still comes up to this day, and it will continue to come up because I think sometimes you've got to be okay with being uncomfortable. And there's a lot of moments that are very uncomfortable. I just think that's part of the growth and part of the journey. So I think too, what helped, I'm just going to be real. Like you talk about opening in the pandemic, that for lack of better, like it sucked. Like that was tough, right? And for lack of better words, but in the same breath, it kind of made you like, all right, if we can do this and we can still remain positive and we can remain a team, like I literally think there's nothing we can't do. And when I say we, like we as a school, we as a team, like we can do this. So. Yeah, I think I've shared it too. Like, it's important for people to know, like, I love it. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. I'm very proud of my school. I'm very proud of my team. And then also recognizing like, it's not perfect and there's still a long way to go and it's ever evolving. And I think there's difficult moments, there's super tough moments, and then there's a lot of really amazing moments. But overall, I can't stress it enough. I'm just very proud to work with everybody that I work with. I'm very proud of my teachers. I'm very proud of my staff. I just think everybody really stays very positive, very motivated. And the thing that I think I love is no matter who you talk to on my campus, we do a big thing about like, what's your why? We do What's Your Why Wednesdays. But I think the thing that I love is everybody is so driven and motivated by seeing success in kids. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of. And so at the end of the day, like, yeah, things are tough and, you know, some things might be difficult and some things might be easier than others, whatever, but everybody remains absolutely 100% focused on the betterment of their students. And that's one thing I love about everybody that I work with here.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.